Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to a brand new episode at The Conscious Athlete. Now, I've actually been kind of offline a little bit with the podcast over the last 2 or 3 weeks. I've had a bit of a crazy one that I'll fill you in on. It's been a bit of a whirlwind with our hybrid athlete training camp we ran in Mijas in Spain last week. Took 30 athletes through the biggest opportunity of growth window these guys had. Like, it was epic. They learned a lot. I had the honor of having my own very good friend Matt and what would we refer to him as? Trauma-informed psychiatrist. Very, very incredible guy. We had the honor of him coming, and our athletes did a lot of work with him, alongside all of the training hours that these guys put in. And big shout out to the Traveling Kitchen as well, because Kimmy's food is unbelievable. And she really listens to what our guys need. Anyway, spent a lot of time out there, prepping for the camp, doing the camp, and then coming back off the camp last week. Lots to catch up on, lots of athletes to help towards Worlds, because it's around the corner. So if you're heading to Nice in 4 weeks time, looking forward to seeing you there. I'm going to be racing in pro women on the Saturday and mixed doubles on the Sunday. So yeah, there's a lot of attention on training and preparation at the moment, whilst also supporting the athletes I work with in their lead up too. So very, very exciting time, but very full on, which is why I'm only just really now this morning sitting down and bringing you another podcast. And where did this one come from? I was actually sitting on the plane back from Mijas, kind of reflecting on the training camp, had some really kind of great chats with people. And I feel that this was a topic that probably could really do with touching on and spreading the love around chronic fatigue and how it shows up in athletes, how as everyday athletes we are very susceptible to chronic fatigue. And many of you guys will know my backstory, or a part of my backstory. We aren't our story. We are a constantly evolving human being, but there are things in life that shape us, right? And create values and allow us to move forward in life and share our experiences with others. So this is a really, really exciting topic for me to discuss. So this episode is basically how to develop optimal performance and avoid chronic fatigue. So this is, something that comes from deep in the heart, because at 19 years old, I was diagnosed with ME, told I would never, ever compete again, never run again, and I may as well throw the towel in on ever taking part in competitive sport again. And here I am 11 years later, with a lot of experience in competitive sport, and most of those 11 years have been competing at high level sports. So being told that at 19, 20 years old can be pretty devastating, and really was, and I did suffer with probably the most extreme case of chronic fatigue, which is known as ME. I was asleep by 2 o'clock every afternoon, and I would sleep right through till 10 the next day, and yet still wake up feeling tired. And it wasn't until I did a lot of my own research, I took situation on my own hands to find and get to the root of why this has happened to me, but more importantly, how do I overcome this? And I went through a big healing journey, more of a physical healing journey. When I say physical, I mean sort of centered around inputs. So, nutrition, training, stress management, sleep, all of those different kind of like what I would call physical inputs. And it hasn't been until later life, probably closer to my 30s, that I've started looking at healing in the sense of inward. So looking more inward than outward, such as releasing trauma from the body, developing a better relationship with self. And I believe that all of these things are what allow us to optimally perform. And I don't just mean performance in terms of our competitive performance, but optimally perform in day-to-day life, right? So like our connections, our relationships, how we show up in the world, who we show up as, and what we can leave behind. And I like this word legacy, right? And I believe that when we find the legacy we want to leave behind, we can find a lot of purpose and passion, and we can have such a such a tremendous impact on the people around us, and everybody that comes in contact with my content, I want to reach really, really deeply. And I believe that's what kind of separates a lot of the work I do with a lot of kind of like what I would call surface level content, you know, how to do a ski erg, how to get better at running, you know, that's all great and grand, but I like the deeper stuff. I like the substance, right? And yeah, this is an episode all about optimal performance, and more importantly, how we can avoid and overcome chronic fatigue. And this is something that I see often. It circles around the fitness industry, you know, coaches, athletes. We're all high performing people, you know, we all put ourselves under so much pressure to perform and be our best and constantly evolve and have achievements. And, you know, and when we are driven and when we are in this kind of growth mindset a lot of the time, our body's like trying to play catch up. It's trying to keep up with, you know, the next thing or, you know, what we want to do. And so if we're not careful, we will experience, you know, these cycles of kind of, you know, what I would refer to as burnout or a constant chronic fatigue that we really can't get to the bottom root of. So I wanted to develop this episode to actually allow you to learn from some of the areas that I really focused on when I was overcoming my journey with ME, and when I was kind of healing myself, and when I really focused on these inputs that I'm going to share with you. It turned my life around, and you know, I'm now 11 years on, able to identify, you know, when I'm experiencing fatigue, where it's coming from, and I'm able to take action on that before it gets too far. So I want to, share with you a little bit about how to overcome those struggles, but also the mind-body connection, you know, on a spiritual level, an emotional level, and all of those different areas that can really lead to us performing optimally day to day. Now, with most athletes or most people that are listening to this content or listening to this episode, the majority of you guys will have businesses, you will have families, you will compete or you will train, you know, to compete, but you're also juggling all of the other things. It's not a case that you can be a full-time athlete, for example, or there might be the odd full-time athlete listening to this, but for the vast majority of people, including myself, you know, we have to fund those competitions, we have to find time to train, and it's not always an easy thing to do. And therefore, when it comes to our development, we have to actually pay even more attention to our body and its whispers, right? And it will talk to us and it will communicate with us. But if we continually ignore it, especially through times of noticing we're fatigued and tired, then if we continue not to listen to it, then we're going to have a bigger problem later down the line, which is why it's so important to listen to those small little indicators that I need to pull back or I need to change something, right? Something needs to change. And this isn't a one size fits all either, by the way. So, you know, I'm going to share a lot of what worked for me. What worked for me usually will potentially work with people, but this has been a long time of development. I would say that I'm still not perfect, and it took me at least kind of 18 months to 2 years to really establish these things as new habits, right? Like, we are human beings, it takes practice. We can't undo 30 years of habitual patterns in a space of 2 days or 1 week or even a month, right? These have to be things that we commit to over and over again to see a result, all right? The same as our athletic performance. Like, we can't do a week of running and expect to undo we can't do a week of a new technique or new running gait or new breathing technique. We can't do that, you know, over a course of a week and undo poor running habits that we've established and had ingrained in us for the last 15 years. So it's super, super important that these things that I share with you that have helped me overcome chronic fatigue, they take time. And I would say that, you know, we don't want to be trying to do them all at once. Like, we want to be kind of pinpointing a few things that we can build in as a habit. And then once that's become quite a habit, then we bring in the next thing, right? So it's a case of like addition as opposed to overload. And that's what's going to get the best result at the end of the day. So what creates an environment, you know, for things like chronic fatigue to pop up in our life? And I believe it comes down to a few things: our physical inputs, Okay, so this is things like nutrition, undernourishing our body, lack of sleep, no exposure to sunlight. Like, these are all kind of like physical inputs, right? They're things that we have to do in order to get a result. And if we don't do them, we don't get the result of, nourishment, energy, surplus, happiness, good energy, all of those things. Then we have emotional and spiritual inputs. So I would say that's going inward, right? Our attachment and relationship to self, our connection with others, our ability to show up, knowing and being really sure of who we are, and our raw substance, our truest nature. Like, who am I? If I strip away everything tomorrow, who am I? Who is left? And that's quite a deep question, but it's also, a real point, because what a lot of people can do, and we see it a lot with Hyrox at the moment, and I was actually quite guilty of this quite early on, is one of the most exhausting pursuits of purpose. So what I mean by that is, when we grow up as a child, if we have unmet needs, we maybe weren't seen, or we weren't heard, or we grew up through our teenage years and then we, fell into a career, or we kind of had to go down a certain path that we felt was the right thing, but we didn't want that path, then we get to a point, and for me it was like losing football as an identity. So as a child, like, all of my identity was centered around football. It was all centered around, showing up as a footballer. And I'd walk through my local high street or town, and people would see me in the back of the newspaper scoring another hat trick, and everything was football, right? So this whole identity was built around football. And then when that went, it was like, whew, stripping away that, who's left, right? Like, who is left? And what we're finding is a lot of people are getting into hybrid training and Hyrox as a sport, and it's blown up so quickly and so vastly that we can, if we have these unmet needs and this unmet pursuit or purpose, then we can latch on to things like Hyrox, and we can latch on to sport, and we can latch on to fitness and, results. And therefore, in this constant pursuit of seeking identity in things and experiences, it can be exhausting. Like, we're in this constant exhausting pursuit of finding, seeking, who am I? Like, and we're attaching identity to things. So then we have to keep doing those things better and better and better and better to be worthy, right? But that's not truth. There's not actually a lot of true substance in that. So I would say that that's another area that can be a driver for chronic fatigue, is an exhausting pursuit of happiness, an exhausting pursuit of finding identity in material things or having more, right? Having more must mean I am more, right? And it's, there's this kind of exhausting pursuit of happiness there. So I would say that between those two things, we either have a recipe of great energy and optimal performance, or we have a great recipe of constant fatigue and, diminished ability to grow and progress forward. So I want to share with you now, which is super exciting, I want to share with you some of the inputs that I've had over the last 11 years that have had drastic, I would say, hand on my heart, have allowed me to run 3 businesses, to be able to be the coach I am today, to show up for multiple people, to be able to structure what I do, but not attach everything I have to what I do. And it's been very difficult. And I would say that I was in an exhausting pursuit of happiness, for sure, for a long period of time. I would find it in business, and then I would find it as being a coach, and then I would find it in athlete Jade. But then when I went through times of kind of, discomfort, or, times where those things weren't necessarily thriving, which always happens, right? It's a journey. Then I would lose myself. And that was a constant exhausting pursuit. So I would say some of those things are worth sharing for sure. And I would say that if you've never been on an inward journey of finding self, I would say that maybe that's an area you really do need to explore. That's going to be saved for a whole nother episode, because that's a really kind of like big area of discussion. And I would really actually like to bring my good friend Matt on a podcast to actually talk about the depth of identity and the depth of trauma-related pursuit of identity or finding self. But we'll save that for another episode. What I want to talk about and cover and discover on this episode is the physical inputs in order to have optimal performance and how we can avoid and overcome chronic fatigue, especially in sports such as Hyrox. And we find at the moment that there's a lot of people doing a lot of high intensity training. They're throwing endless amounts of training hours into their week while also trying to be on the gym floor, coaching other people, trying to juggle their family commitments. And I can see this kind of constant evolving chronic fatigue underlying in the fitness industry. No one kind of wants to own up to it. No one wants to show up and speak about it because there's weakness in saying I'm struggling or I'm tired or I'm fatigued. Yet we keep pushing and pushing and pushing our body. So what are some of the inputs then that I have really committed to over the years that have allowed me to overcome really chronic fatigue and ME? And I'm going to give you a few that I think are some of the biggest key ones that if you really do implement now, if you're struggling with fatigue in any way, that I think is going to be huge for you. So I would say that number one has been my removal of processed foods. So looking on the back of something, a food or a meal or whatever it is, and if it looks like a chemical shitstorm and I can't identify the ingredients in it, then I know it's going to send my body into an inflammatory state. Like my body's not going to really be able to process that. It's not going to find much nutritional value in there. And therefore, my body's going to be constantly searching for nutrition on the basis of hunger, right? It's searching for nutrition all the time. And so processed food creates more processes in the body. So the body has to process processed food a lot harder. There's a lot more energy into it to process it. There's a lot more seeking of nutrition, and therefore, and a lot of the ingredients that are packed into those processed foods to improve shelf life and longevity and taste, etc. Substance, xanthan gum, MSGs, emulsifiers, soy lecithin, like these are all ingredients that cause inflammation in the body over a period of time. Now, it doesn't just happen in 2 days. It's a compound effect of having those ingredients constantly flowing into our body. And therefore, removing processed foods is the biggest shift I made. Now, that's not always possible when we're trying to get the right amount of calories in as an athlete. Some people are sitting going, well, to eat real food can be really difficult. Especially when we're on a short timeline and, we don't have a lot of time to prepare. But I would say that, as long as we limit our intake of processed food, there's going to be the odd time that we might have to reach for it. We're at a garage, we're at a service station, we need convenience foods, maybe potentially at the airport, whatever it is. I'm not saying that it has to be 100% raw, real food all week long, but I would say 90% effort on our nutritional needs being met by eating real food, especially as an athlete. Remember, we expend a lot of nutrients. Like we expend a lot of minerals, vital, that we get those back in. So we want nutrient-dense foods coming in the body. Okay, raw, real foods are going to be the biggest go-to. Some of my favorite snack bars are going to be things like naked bars, deliciously edibles. I tend to snack on dates, the froyos, like the fruit. There's a lot of different things that are still pre-made that aren't necessarily hugely processed, okay, and they don't have a lot of additives. So those are kind of like my kind of go-to snacks. Chemical-free products is the second thing. So this is something that I was kind of not skeptical about in my early 20s, but when I worked with my natural medicine, Dr. Holistic coach, Ryan, we went through, it's had such a profound effect on my health overall. So I actually don't wear perfume anymore, any of the perfumes. I actually have to hold my breath as much as possible when I walk through the airport now, because it sends me into instant headache when I walk through the fragrance section, even breathing all of that in. But I tend to lean towards more essential oils now. I put a lot of essential oils on my skin. like, I don't tend to wear a lot of makeup anyway, but chemical-free makeup, chemical-free creams, etc. I use coconut oil on my body, and I tend to use what they call, it's a little brand, a little shop I found in Lake District called Hubble Bubble, and the lady that owns that company makes everything from scratch. So since I've been using that, like, my skin feels incredible. And therefore, yeah, like chemical-free products. So I'm talking about things like deodorant, toothpaste, like my toothpaste. I haven't used fluoride toothpaste for 3 years now, maybe 4 years. My teeth feel stronger than ever. And yeah, like overconsumption of fluoride, it obviously, like, where would we put an aspirin if, you know, if we were having a heart attack, for example? Like, the quickest route into our system is under the tongue, like our gums, right? And therefore, when we're brushing our teeth, constant 30, 35, 40 years of fluoride buildup in our body is just not good, right? So yeah, so I tend to have Dr. Bronner's toothpaste. There's lots of other brands out there, fluoride free. I tend to use a non-alcohol, non-aluminium deodorant stick, so that can have a lot of profound effects on the lymph system. So obviously, again, 30 years of using alcohol, aluminium, heavy metals are found in deodorants that can be taken in by the lymph system, or are taken in by the lymphatic system, and that can be overworked, especially females as well, who, you know, we are training all the time, we're using a lot of deodorant, it's very close to our breast tissue, so obviously, you know, we need to be careful as well. So I now pretty much I'm completely chemical free. We've even gone to the extent over the last few years as well of cleaning the house with apple cider vinegar concentrate, so it doesn't actually smell either, but we don't use any kind of like chemicals in the house now either. And again, it's that thing, isn't it, where it's a compound effect of years and years of exposure to chemicals. Like, we don't want to be having all of that in our system, breathing that in, touching it. Like, it builds up a toxic terrain in the body, and our body's constantly then trying to detoxify from exposure to those kind of things and those chemicals, which can lead us to, you know, ill health and really experiencing issues, really. So that's kind of like the next one, is I've gone very, very chemical free when it comes to products and stuff like that. Also soaps, shampoos, etc. You think, you know, you're washing your body at the end of the day, like what you're washing your body in is super important as well. Essential supplements and not health damaging supplements. So over the years, I only really take supplements that I know are going to be hugely beneficial for my health. I always look to food first and then fill in the blanks through supplementation, not the other way around. A lot of people are quick to just like load up on supplements and not actually look to their real food intake. So I normally say supplements should be a buffer as opposed to your sole focus. Some of the really good supplements are obviously a good quality whey protein that's not been denatured, and then it's good quality. I take a really strong liposmal vitamin C supplement, and since I've been taking that, my immune system's been epic, especially with high levels of training as well. We want to be making sure we're having high levels of vitamin C. D3, I also take strong, good quality probiotics and hardwood charcoal for my gut lining, and also fulvic minerals as well. Those are kind of like my main go-tos. Depending on where I'm at, you know, if I'm traveling a lot or going on holiday or anything like that, obviously my supplementation will change, but those are kind of like my specific go-tos. I don't tend to take electrolytes as such. I create my own through fulvic minerals, lemon in my water, and pure sea salt as well. What are some of the other things? So I would say training intelligently is another thing. You know, when I say the word intelligently, a lot of athletes are very, very overtrained in terms of, you know, they're not balancing with recovery. If you are somebody who is a full-time athlete and has all the time in the world to recover properly, regular massage, you know, exposure to saunas and cold plunges every single day, then, you know, we can train more. But when we're burning the candle at both ends and we're having to run from our training session to the school pickup, the school drop off, and then we're having to prep loads of dinner, then we're having to get to work, like all of those different moving commitments, 100% mean that we have to train intelligently, and we have to listen to our body. And as high performers, we tend not to. We want to go. We want to do, and we don't necessarily want to stop, and be. So it's super important to actually allow recharge, be in solitude, being in nature, sometimes substituting out a really hard, heavy session to lean into what your body needs, which at that moment could actually be like, an open water swim or a walk in nature for an hour, a long hike with some elevation. Grounding is another one as well. So, depending on where you're at, how you're feeling, I normally say, getting out in nature every day for at least half an hour to an hour is super important. The health benefits and the recovery benefits of direct sunlight is profound. So super important that we expose ourselves to sunlight regularly as well. And then also supporting our own circadian rhythm. So we normally say that the hours between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. are going to be the best hours to focus on sleep and rejuvenation. We've got all sorts of negative impacts if we don't support the circadian rhythm, such as lower serotonin, lower levels of dopamine production, secretion, lower levels of testosterone in males and females, disrupted hormones in terms of menstrual cycle, obviously lack of recovery, therefore increase in risk of injury. So working to our circadian rhythm is super, super important. And I usually try and advise my athletes I work with to aim between 10 and 5 a.m. To get the best quality of sleep between those times as well. And that leads me on to like blue light exposure. So try and not in the evening past, let's say 6:30, 7 p.m., try not to be really exposed to blue light because that has a negative impact on the neurotransmitters and how we switch off and wind down at nighttime. So it's really, really important as well. Cold and sauna exposure. These are sort of all other things that I've brought in over the years that I've tried to have a real focus on. I tend to sauna 3 times a week if I can. I usually go 20 minutes and then 3 minutes cold, 20 minutes, 3 minutes cold, 20 minutes, 3 minutes cold. And that will be my routine 3 times a week. Sometimes I struggle to get 3 times in. It might be twice, but at least twice a week. I tend to do that as well. Helps with detoxification. It also helps in that sauna as well. If you look at your heart rate, 10 minutes into, a 95, 100 degree sauna, your heart rate's going to be 100 beats a minute, which is helping with actually some levels of your cardio capacity. So it can help support sort of zone 2 training as well, and a lot of aerobic development. So super, super important that. And then there's also leading in towards optimal performance in terms of lowering our levels of radiation. So on a cellular level, we can have disrupted cells through high levels of EMF exposure, for example. So if I show you now, we turn the easiest way to limit your EMF exposure is actually to turn your Wi-Fi router off in the evenings. It helps with your lymphatic system too when you are trying to recover overnight and your body's trying to do what it needs to and regenerate. I actually have an EMF blocker memonizer on the back of my phone as well, and one on the back of my laptop. Obviously being in touch with technology, running an online business, you are on your phone and your laptop a lot, and we actually have an exposure to EMFs every day all around us. We've got 4G, 5G towers in the city centres and things like that. So it's super important to just protect yourself and just limit the exposure to that, because on a deep it can deeply penetrate on a cellular level. There was actually a study done. I'll actually attach it, but there was a study done where they took some test tubes and they filled some test tubes with sperm here, and they had some with sperm here. And what they did was, over a course of, I can't remember how many days it was, it must have been like 5 days, they exposed one lot of test tubes to EMF, so radiation, through a cell phone, and then they had the other ones that had no EMF exposure at all, no radiation, and these ones died. These sperm cells died within an hour and a half. These ones were still living on and living strong. So yeah, so obviously when it comes to having your phones in your pocket really close to your testicles, your ovaries, girls that run with their phone in their breast, like it can be really quite detrimental. And like I said, there's a lot of studies done. You can do a lot of research on EMF exposure and radiation as well. But yeah, I would say that these are some of the things that, you know, I've really focused in on and dialed into. You know, for me, sharing this stuff is passion. It's a passion of mine. I'm not sharing any of this stuff for any gain at all, but to really help you to overcome the chronic fatigue that can kick in from time to time as human beings. And, you know, if we don't listen to it, it becomes a chronic problem. So at the moment, it might just be that you're feeling a bit tired, you know, the fatigue isn't subsiding. Maybe you get, you know, you cycle it every, you know, 4 weeks or 6 weeks, you find that you're getting ill or your immune system's suppressed. And then that can leave you with viruses, and then you have post-viral fatigue, which can lead on to chronic fatigue. So this is just something I wanted to share with you today, especially as we actually lead at the moment. As I'm recording this episode, we're leading into the World Championship Hyrox event. And then we have a summer off season. So this could be a perfect time for you to really, you know, train intelligently, get back into your body, realign yourself after a heavy season of competing, and take some time to ground, find what works for you. Focus on nutrition and inputs as opposed to outputs over the next couple of months, so that you can really, what would I call it? Reignite your health and your passion for self. Because like I said before in the earlier part of this episode, it can be very difficult to, you know, regather identity in oneself. We try and find it very externally. So I hope that this has been really helpful. Like I said before, I think that there's a lot of things that you can take out of this in terms of training intelligently, recovery, leaning into your circadian rhythm, spending time in nature, just recapping on, you know, removal of processed foods, going as organic as possible is something I didn't mention, but as a value of mine, organic food, especially with how the world is going, organic food is so important. I would actually argue that it's one of the most important when you're trying to optimize health, because we have all of the, you know, our food covered in pesticides and chemicals. And it's not just a case of washing it off, right? It's penetrated into our food, and we're having that secondhand. So heavy metals have been found as well in foods, and again, it's not just a one thing; it's a compound effect of 35 years of eating that stuff. It does something to our system. So we want to be thinking about, on a cellular level, how do we support health? How do we support our cell function, right? And that comes down to real food, right? It comes down to removal of chemicals, lowering our exposure to those things, leans towards more organic food. And like I said, a big value of mine. So our hard-earned money, like where we put it is completely up to us, right? But for me, a value being such a deep value, root value being health, for me, leaning towards organic food and spending that extra bit of money, I'd rather that than a new car, or I'd rather that than, you know, doing up a room in my house. So those things are super important. And yeah, I think that pretty much wraps up, you know, this episode around optimal performance. You know, the healthy athlete is always going to trump the unhealthy athlete in the long term, and therefore it's important that we look after our foundations and we put the foundations in place for us to optimize our health and remove our risk of chronic fatigue, especially as an athlete. So this is me sending you a lot of love. Any questions, always feel free to reach out on Instagram. Please make sure you like, share, subscribe, do what you need to do. Share the love, share this episode on your Instagram channel, which can always help inspire others to take action on optimizing their health. And therefore, that is me, over and out. Gonna go and enjoy the sunshine. We've had a week of beautiful weather. So that is me about to head out and do my training. For now, this episode is out. Take care. Have an amazing week. With love from me to you.